Do you often forget to eat a meal? Do you ever miss a meal or eat it late and feel like you're better off for it? Have you ever wondered if intermittent fasting would be right for you? One common question I get from clients who struggle with missing meals is it okay to miss these meals? If I'm missing these meals and I actually feel fine without them, does that mean that I should try intermittent fasting? These are often questions coming from clients of mine who are known to be ADHD or believe they may have ADHD. So on today's episode, I'm answering questions like, is it so bad to not eat or to forget a meal? Is intermittent fasting a good or bad idea if you're ADHD? Dr. Ben Lynch's example for how to use intermittent fasting if you're ADHD, and tips from me on foods to keep around that are healthy and that you can eat at any moment, anywhere, if you need some food ASAP. If you have trouble eating meals consistently, then this episode is for you. Hey friend, welcome to the Better Belly podcast. If you're currently trying endless supplements, doctor visits, and diet changes to heal your mystery symptoms, you are in the right place. We're here to solve the real root causes behind your gut, hormones, skin, sleep, and brain concerns. Literally anything and everything in your body. My name is Allison Jordan. I'm a functional medicine practitioner that has supported over 150 clients just like you to heal problems that no one has been able to fix. You don't need a perfect diet or a random supplement you found on Instagram to heal. You need a proven system that heals your whole body from the inside out. That's what I'm here to share with you, episode by episode. It's time to make health easy again. And just as a reminder, this information is not meant to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your own health practitioner before you make any changes to your health. So, as I shared in the intro for this episode's content was inspired partly because we're currently in an ADHD series on the Better Belly podcast. If you are new to the podcast and you have ADHD and you are just looking for more ways that you can support it, especially biologically. So not talking about medications, not talking about just lifestyle or like systems to try to implement in your life, but like literally just make it easier biologically, then I highly recommend checking out some of the previous episodes we have going on. And also next week's episode coming out on Tuesday, where I've been talking about different biological components that can just make ADHD a lot harder on you, that you can actually literally completely change and remove out of your life. You don't need any ongoing systems or kind of things that you have to keep up with, right? That's like the last thing you want if you have ADHD. So highly recommend this series. But this episode was also inspired by some of my ADHD clients, or even clients who don't have a diagnosis of ADHD, but tell me that they're kind of regularly forgetting to eat meals, but they actually feel okay after it. And it's not always the case. Sometimes they forget to eat a meal and they definitely feel pretty crappy later when they realize, oh, I didn't eat a meal or I didn't have time to, whatever. But especially for the cases where they're like, I didn't eat lunch today, or I ate a delayed lunch at like 3:00 and I actually felt really good. My energy was fine. I enjoyed my meal at 3:00, whatever was going on. And they kind of ask me like, is that okay? And I wanted to bring that information, the same things that I share with them when they ask that question, to you. So let's start off with the question, just, is it bad to forget your meals? I like to answer this in a yes or no, yes and no, or maybe no and yes. So when a client tells me I forgot to eat a meal or is delayed because I was focused on something. So they were doing, a lot of times this is a work activity for my clients who work, but maybe it's a hobby, something they were really into. They were working on remodeling their kitchen or painting something or reading something, and they just didn't realize that noon passed by and now it's 3:00. And when they realize they hadn't eaten, they then think to themselves, I mean, I'm hungry, but like they're not irritable, they're not crabby, they're not fatigued. Their ability to focus is just fine. What is happening here, especially if you're ADHD, but even possibly if you're not, is that when we are very engaged in something, we get a consistent output of dopamine that can basically keep our brain focused on that activity and not focused on other things like bodily signals, including like, I need to pee, right? And this is a great thing, especially if you're ADHD. ADHD has a myriad of factors involved in it, but a key one that researchers believe is involved in it is dopamine regulation problems. And so getting the right amount of dopamine, not too much, not too little for someone with ADHD is super important. And I would say if you're really focused, and this is what I tell my clients, if you're really focused and enjoying yourself and you're kind of noticing time go by, maybe you're not at all, and you realize you missed a meal, do not beat yourself up over it. Don't be like, oh, it's my ADHD again, or I missed a meal again, because your body was getting what it needed. The big thing, if you are having delayed meals or missed meals, just having food that you can then go eat ready and available to you. I think that the double whammy in this is if you forget to eat because you were really focused on this, but now you also don't have any snacks available, any food, and you're starving, and then you do start kind of getting that slippery slope of my blood sugar is dysregulated. I'm not getting the dopamine from my activity I was engaged in anymore. And now I am quickly sliding into, anger, irritability, poor functioning. But if you have that food available, it can be really rewarding to go from a high dopamine producing activity that you were really heavily had deep focus in to then eating a good meal that fills you up for the next chunk of time that you're going to try and do work or fun or whatever you're going to do. That is the scenario that I have clients say, yes, that feels like me. Now, in that case, I say, it's not bad to forget your meals. Even I do this. And I'll be open, like I'm currently being evaluated to see if I have some ADHD, if I'm on that spectrum of ADHD. And because I identify with a lot of things that people can describe that are ADHD, including if I'm really focused in something, I can forget to eat, and I don't beat myself up over it. I'm just like, wow, that was really enjoyable to be in the flow. And I encourage you, let yourself be in the flow. When I say it's bad to forget meals, is if you're kind of simply forgetting or failing to eat, failing being like you didn't plan to eat, so there's nothing available to eat, and now you're kind of scrambling, and you're not doing a dopamine producing activity that was causing you to forget. You're just not prepared because there's a lot of distraction. So you have that distractibility component of ADHD opposed to the hyper focus. There's the hypo focus distractibility, not having planned to have anything to eat. So you're basically not getting any dopamine because you're not doing a dopamine producing activity from hyper focus. And you also aren't getting food, which food's a natural dopamine producer. Eating fat, protein, carbs, just having a full belly produces dopamine. Yay, dopamine. And when you don't have any food and no dopamine, you are going to experience those sugar cravings, poor focus, anger, irritability, and then possibly relying on less helpful dopamine sources like caffeine, sugar, alcohol, social media scrolling, shopping, procrastination. And you can get in that negative spiral where there's paralysis, there's anger and irritability, etc. So if that's more of what you're dealing with, I'd say yes, find a way where you can be eating meals regularly. Work with someone who's a systems expert to help people with ADHD to create systems that are life-giving to them and not like that A, just don't work, or B, like make you want to choke yourself. One person I really recommend, I love her podcast. It's Motherhood in ADHD by Patricia Sung, and I'll put a link in the show notes so that you guys can go check out her podcast. But she gives a lot of helpful tips on especially for women with ADHD who are moms, though I think you don't have to be a mom to listen to the podcast and glean tips from it. But I like that podcast. There are definitely other experts out there, or even just people with ADHD who are sharing their tips and tricks on how to craft your life in an ADHD friendly way, including like eating regular meals. But I actually had Patricia Sung from Motherhood in ADHD on our podcast, which would have been 2 podcasts previous to this one. And she talked a little bit on her tips and tricks on how to eat regularly and how to take supplements regularly, specifically since I recommend my clients to take supplements, and sometimes that can be a barrier, is just the regularity of taking them. So definitely go check out her podcast episode with us. Check out her podcast if you're more in that latter, like I'm not eating meals, but not because you're like really engaged in something. So if you're going to say to yourself, I'm going to just plan that I know that I get into maybe during the work week or on the weekend when you're reading a good book or something, you're going to plan that that you will really get involved in something and forget to eat because you're in a high dopamine input. And it can literally break your flow to say, well, I'm going to go drag myself off and force myself to eat a meal when I'm not even interested in the food because I'm still basically high in a good way, high on this dopamine producing activity. So don't do that, but just plan that as soon as you're done with that stimulating task, that you have food available to eat. And I'm going to give some tips later in this podcast on what I have around and what I do to make sure I have food available. Some things that you can have that are dangers if you're choosing to do this path is just like not listening to cues of your body if you really are getting hungry, and just basically causing your body to go into a workaholism state where you're just working, but you're actually are feeling worse and worse as you're doing this. So just starting to learn your own, what's like the red line in your body where you're like, oh, we're like starting to get too far into this. We really need to eat today. Or we didn't have a big enough breakfast and we really should just get something in us so that we can quickly then come back to this activity. So definitely want to keep in mind listening to cues of your body, making sure there's food available to eat as soon as you're done with your engaging activity. And giving allowance that if your body isn't giving you hunger cues, you're not experiencing fatigue, you're not experiencing poor focus, anger, irritability, stomach growling, maybe you could try intermittent fasting, which is essentially intentionally planning that you're not going to eat at like 8 a.m., noon, 5 or 6 p.m., kind of the 3 meal window increments that many people are doing, at least in America. Maybe you're not going to do those. You're going to do something like 2 larger meals later in the day or 2 larger meals earlier in the day. And I would, if you are struggling or if you know you have ADHD, I would pick windows where you're not going to be working, because work is going to typically be more engaging and you'll feel more torn, or maybe work's not engaging and you're going to be struggling with that task switching and like distraction of like, I'm eating, I'm not working. Your brain won't know which task it's doing. So if you're going to try intermittent fasting, if you work in the evening shift, I recommend trying to eat in the morning hours. And if you work like morning to afternoon, the 9 to 5 hours, try to focus more on your eating in the afternoon to evening. Try that out. Try it out. And that could go potentially really well for you, where you're like literally just planning for it. Now, what I'm going to say next is not a like how-to guide on how to intermittent fast. There's different types of intermittent fasting, different windows. You could do windows that are shorter, windows that are longer. But this is a reminder on what intermittent fasting is not, and ways to know you're not doing intermittent fasting right, or at least maybe you're not thinking about it right. If you're listening to this and I want you to like go into intermittent fasting with the right mindset. So intermittent fasting is not starving yourself. It's not getting the number of calories you need each day. It's not like you simply remove the 1,000 calories you are going to get from one meal. It's know that you move it. It's not remove, you move it to a different part of the day. It's not a calorie cutting strategy. It is not a excuse to hit your total number of calories that you need in a day with junk food. Like, well, I need 2,000 calories today and I just ate dinner, which was 1,000 calories. So I'm going to eat 1,000 calories in ice cream. You could do it, but usually you're not going to feel the best because you're not getting the vitamins and minerals and other nutrients you need. And so those are some things that I would caution you against thinking as you're going into it. This is, again, it's not extreme dieting. It's just a different choice to have expectations on when you're going to eat. Not that you're going to eat different things. Like what you eat is probably going to be the same, like high quality food, mix of carbs, protein, fat, vegetables, minerals. But you're just doing it at a different time of day, mainly because you're noticing that you're not hungry at the other times a day when other people are eating. Some wrong reasons to intermittent fast that that I feel like are like red flags when a client asks me, should I be intermittent fasting? Is everyone else is doing it. You have a friend who's doing it. It feels like everybody on social media is talking about it. Intermittent fasting is right for some people and it's wrong for others. And it can be right for certain stages of your life, but not all stages of your life. So don't beat yourself up if it's worked in the past and it's not working now, or the next time you try it now and it works, but it's not working in 5 years. For women in particular, there's a huge role in intermittent fasting being more or less effective depending on what our hormones are like. So if you're pregnant versus if you're menstruating versus if you're post menopausal, all that. So don't do it because everyone else is doing it. Definitely listen to your body, and don't do it because an intermittent fasting coach says it's like God's gift to mankind. It is. Like if somebody's an intermittent fasting coach and they know all the ins and out on intermittent fasting, it's because it helped them and they believe in it. But and they can be very enthusiastic about it, but it doesn't mean it's right for you. And you can just like bless and release them if you try intermittent fasting and you're like, this doesn't work. Or you could be curious and say, I tried intermittent fasting, it didn't work, but I still intuit maybe it could, maybe I didn't do it the best, or maybe there's some nuances to it I wasn't really getting down, something like that. And yeah, then you can listen to the intermittent fasting coach, see if they can give you tips that could help. But otherwise, somebody's going to say that, a completely meat only diet's the best, and someone's going to say a vegetarian or vegan diet's the best, and they all say it because they had a good experience with it. So they're not lying, but it doesn't mean it's right for everyone. Okay. So good reasons to intermittent fast. You want it to be an intentional choice to work with the rhythms of your body. And I've already mentioned a couple things like rhythms of your body can include different seasons of life. Like intermittent fasting is not good when you're pregnant. It's just not. I mean, maybe someone had a good experience with it, but biologically we need consistent input of food and not having, other than when we're sleeping, huge swaths of time where our body becomes catabolic because you're growing a human and there's no breaks in growing a human. And also intermittent fasting has been shown to typically be better when you're pre and postpartum. So when you're, not postpartum, guys, pre and post menopausal. So as you're going through menopause and your hormones are changing, we just found with women who are postmenopausal and approaching that can also help regulate their hormones, help them detox, things like that. It may work in different parts of your menstrual cycle. So if you are menstruating, you might find that you can intermittent fast really well close to ovulation, but not close to your period. And that can also be because of how hormones can impact the rest of your cycle. But if you're menstruating, you also might find that intermittent fasting, you can do it at any point in your cycle. And it has to do with just how your hormones are interfacing with the rest of your biology, which is so unique to every single person. So the best way to like figure this out is to actually test it yourself on your body. Your body is your best teacher of itself. Some other things that interesting about intermittent fasting is it may work better during work days versus vacation / weekend / light work days. The reason for this is something that Dr. Ben Lynch talks about in his book, Dirty Genes. So it's a great book, and he talks about 2 genes in particular, which can really affect ADHD, which I've talked about on this podcast. They're the MAOA gene and the COMT gene. Just look at the previous episodes, 2 or 3. It'd be like straight previous to this would be the COMT episode. And then 3 episodes prior to this episode is going to be the MAOA gene episode. And I really dive into what those genes are doing and why they correlate with ADHD and why they can alter your appetite or impact how you choose to eat. So Dr. Ben Lynch doesn't claim that he's ADHD, but he does say he has these genes that can correlate with ADHD. And he finds that when he's in work days, he's usually in super intense mode. Like he's at his clinic, he's seeing patients, it's really fast paced, he's enjoying his work, he has high focus, he has no interest in eating. And then he'll eat a lot of food at the end of the day once he gets home is with his family. But when he's on vacation or on the weekends and he's not in his office, he's not working, he's not going and speaking at a conference or traveling the world, his nervous system's calmer. He's not getting lots of dopamine input from his work. It's not bad. It's just different. And he actually will eat more of the 3 meals a day pattern and sometimes smaller meals at more times during the weekends and vacation. And when I read that, I thought it was so beautiful because it makes so much more sense biologically that there are rhythms. And he's male. He's like not even dealing with the additional female hormone fluctuations. That I thought it was so, because it makes so much more sense why it doesn't make as much sense to say, I'm going to do this one thing for forever and it will always work. Yes, 3 meals a day might have worked for you at certain points. Maybe when you were a younger child and your days were automatically had a really strong rhythm that included meals. But now you have days where you have projects due at work or you're doing outings with your kids or whatever, and there's not food involved automatically. And maybe you're really engaged in getting dopamine input and you're fine without eating 3 meals a day. That's totally fine. So going back, this is just make intermittent fasting, if you're going to do it, an intentional choice to work with the rhythms of your life and your day. Other ways to do intermittent fasting right is it's something you're doing because you notice an improvement in your functionality. Again, this is not for everybody, but if you notice, wow, I just stopped putting all this pressure, expecting myself to eat at noon. Again, because noon's often going to be one of the meals that maybe you won't do. If you're like working 9 to 5, it'll tend to be like you're going to have a 2 to 10 p.m. eating window or something. But if you're not, you take off all this pressure and expectation, you're going to eat a meal that you don't even typically want to eat because you're focused on other things. And then you just have less stress and guilt. And then you plan to eat more in the evening, and you're not berating yourself for eating a lot of food when you get home from work. And you're just like, you feel happy, you feel lighter, you feel like it flows better with your life. That's an improvement in functionality. But if you feel stressful, like I'm doing this intermittent fasting thing because I heard it's good for you and I'm starving and I can't function and my brain's turning off, please eat, okay? So make sure it's something, if you're doing intermittent fasting, make sure it's something you're doing because you noticed an improvement in your functionality. Make sure it's something you do with a plan for what you're going to eat and how much during your eating window. So have an idea of how many calories you need. You can work with a nutritionist to figure that out, whether you have a weight loss goal or weight maintenance goal or weight gain goal, if you're trying to build muscle. Whatever you want to do, figure out what your calories you need are and make sure you're eating that in your eating window. And then make sure what you are eating is good quality, mix of carbs, protein, fat, maybe heavier in protein and fat if you feel better on that, like I do. For me, I know when I'm near my menstruation window, I feel better eating some more carbs than I typically am the rest of the month. And I don't beat myself up. I'm like, bring on the carbs, eat the noodles, have an apple, like just eating more carbs. And the last thing is I see people really enjoying their intermittent fasting when it's not something that they feel that they have to be 100% rigid on. And this goes back to working with the rhythms of your life. The best way to maintain a diet is to find something that works for you, not like you're working for, right? I'm going to say that again. It's the best way to maintain a diet in an enjoyable way is find a diet that works for you, not you're working for it. And that doesn't mean you don't have to plan and it's so easy and food magically pops up in your refrigerator at 5 p.m. when it's time to eat. But, that's just not going to happen. But it means that it feels more reasonable for your rhythm of life. You can work with a nutritionist, again, if you want more tips and ideas on meals to eat and how much to eat. If you're just transitioning you're just used to eating smaller portions at a meal or eating less at 3 times a day rather than more in a shorter window of time to eat. Again, that's just going to be a great way if you're just trying to make that transition quickly and you don't want to have to go Google stuff. I do not focus on nutrition specifics on this podcast, not to make you go and leave, but because I find that typically people are here because it doesn't matter how many nutritional changes they've made, they don't feel better. And that can also happen if you're like, I just don't feel good no matter what I'm eating, Allison. I never feel like I have good energy. I'm always irritable. I have a free training on how to actually figure out what's going on, what lab testing you need, and basically figure out what's clogging up your body's ability to digest and absorb nutrients that your doctor isn't going to be able to find. It's depressing, but it's true. Doctors are not able to find the toxins and the problems that are blocking you from digesting and absorbing nutrients, which is going to make, whether you're eating 3 meals a day or small meals, like 7 times a day, or a really big meal like intermittent fasting and a smaller eating window. If you just still don't feel good, go to betterbellytherapies.com/training or click the link that I have in the show notes. And we have a video that's going to show you exactly what you need, the types of labs, why, what's going on. And it's just going to be a nice shortcut to healing for you. So, the last thing, if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, that was a lot of information, Allison, great. What could I do next? Maybe whether you're ready to jump into intermittent fasting or not, maybe you're not. What I would recommend you to start with is just reflect on yourself. I want you to think on days off from work, on your weekends, on times when you don't have your kids around. Are you eating more? And I'm not talking, I mean, not necessarily binging, but are you just like, wow, I just feel like it's easier just to get that food in my belly. You know, this might not just be that you have more time to eat, which I think prior to reading Dr. Ben Lynch's book, I thought, well, yeah, on vacation, like half of what you do is eat. It's like the activity to do. There's more time to eat. But it could also be that you're literally not getting sunk into really heavy focused tasks, or you're having a hard time task switching out of, and you're literally just spending more time focusing on the task of eating itself, which again is common on weekends and vacations because you don't have as much trying to force itself into your mind. But it could also be maybe on weekends and vacation, there's less inherent rhythms in the day. You're simply forgetting to eat. You're not planning to eat. Or maybe you're very engaged in a book or going out with your kids and it's keeping your dopamine high. Just notice, like, is there a delineation for you between work weeks, work days, or even specific work days, like a heavy work day versus a light work day, if you have that variation in your work, and then vacation, and just notice. And you could say, maybe you're going to adopt different eating rhythms to suit those different times. But at the end of the day, if you are feeling crabby because you're not eating, do eat. Find a way to make that work, and go and listen to Patricia Sung's episode we had a week ago on how to take supplements and eat regularly with ADHD. So the last thing I wanted to mention was just some snacks and foods that I like to keep available for me when I am hungry. And this could be like, I forgot to eat because I was really focused. It could be that I didn't realize that my grocery trip's going to take so long, or maybe like all your errands stack up and you are just away from your home where the food is and you are starving. That has happened to me a lot, especially when I transitioned to having a daughter. I just felt like having a baby and a little thing around it, like absorbs and expands all the time it takes to do stuff, just balloons. And I found that I was just hungry. Plus I was breastfeeding early on. I was just hungry all the time. So if you're a woman, highly recommend keeping shelf-stable food in your purse, like literally on your person, because if it's in the car, which is a secondary good place to have it, but if you're in your car and you're at the zoo or you're whatever, somewhere that you can't get food right then, unless it's in your purse, which tends to be on you, it's still not as useful. So I keep shelf-stable food in my purse that's good for my diet, high in fat and protein. It's got some fiber. Typically, it's going to be things like dark chocolate. The only downside to dark chocolate is it can melt in the summer. But dark chocolate is high in fat and low in sugar. So dark chocolate, not milk chocolate. And then nuts and nut bars, because I'm not eating grains like oats. I don't have like an oat bar or something like that in my car, but nuts and nut bars have protein in them, fat and fiber. And I find that those are really good, and they're shelf stable. So they're not going to go bad. I don't have to replace it out of my purse, which is one more thing to think about. If you have access to a fridge or can put a mini fridge somewhere by your office desk or something like that, then I also keep around non-shelf stable food in a fridge area that I know I can just grab. If I like forgot to meal prep and I just even need to eat some food, dang it, before I start prepping my meal, my lunch or something. I'm keeping around cheese. I have a whole episode on, I'm dairy free, but I literally do eat cheese because there are cheeses you can eat if you're dairy free. So I actually I shared an episode on this, and I will put the link in the show notes for the dairy-free food hacks that I use regularly to feed me and my family creamy and cheesy foods there's no fake cheese involved. We're not talking about vegan stuff with lots of fillers, really yummy cheeses that you can eat if you're dairy-free. If you're not dairy-free, eat whatever cheese you want. I have a high-protein muffin that I typically keep in my fridge. It's a chocolate high-protein muffin, chocolate chips in it, super yummy. I have a recipe. I will put the link in the show notes. I put the recipe on my Instagram. So it's a reel with the recipe ingredients inside of the caption. Boiled eggs, chicken salad. I'll like rotate between chicken salad and tuna salad, which is fairly fast to make. And I'll make, 3 to 4 servings of it so that I can eat that for lunch for a couple days. And that just means I have protein. There's mayo in it, so I have fat. I'll add, if it's chicken salad, there'll be some almond slivers and some onion and celery. It just makes it yummy. That makes it really easy. It's a little bit of more food prep involved in this one. I guess same with the high protein muffins, but they're just grab and go things that if I don't have this like elaborate meal option that I've prepped, it is something. And it's actually really amazing something or another. I'm gluten and grain free, and I use almond flour wraps. Literally probably what I'm going to eat for lunch today is an almond flour wrap that I'll put the chicken salad in that I did make. So I have that with some lettuce. And I mean, that's like a real meal right there. Right. But that's the plan. And it was super simple to make. I made it once and I had 3 or 4 servings, and it's getting me through most of my work week this week is that chicken salad, having it for lunch. All right, guys, so that is it for today's episode. I hope that was helpful. I hope it got the juices flowing and helps you feel a little bit more free and flexible around approaching intermittent fasting, missing meals. It's not, I know a whole like tips and tricks on how to not miss meals if it's more of the forgetfulness, failure to plan situation. But I hope it brings freedom if you're like, wow, I'm allowed to just like let myself be in flow and eat a delayed meal or like plan to just intermittent fast on my work week and then eat normal, like not normal, but like your more 3 meals a day on a vacation or weekend. There's flexibility and flow, and it's what I stand for. One of the things I stand for the most in my podcast, in my business, in Better Belly Therapies is to listen to your body, let your body be the guide. And if things are not working for you that quote unquote should be, if you're not losing weight, if you're not getting energy from eating healthy, clean foods, then look deeper. And that is what I'm here for. That's what the Better Belly Blueprint is here for, which is my process that I created after working with over 600 clients and seeing that it's the fastest, most clear way to get results, get rid of bloating, constipation, diarrhea, acid reflux, fatigue, brain fog, eczema, so many things that can be going on that if food is not solving it, changing when you eat is not solving it, taking medications, maybe like helps a little, but like doesn't solve it, then you want to be looking deeper. And that's what my program does and helps you be in the driver's seat of your health. So go to betterbellytherapies.com/training if you want to finally get rid of those things, stop being told by doctors that your labs look normal, and let your intuition of what your body needs actually be validated by labs that your doctor can never do for you. So go to betterbellytherapies.com/training to learn about the Better Belly Blueprint, why it's getting our clients results, and get started healing today. Hey friend, I hope you loved this episode. If you've been a fan for a while or newly loving this podcast, can you do me a favor? Drop into Apple Podcasts and leave me a review. When you leave a review, you do so much. You help me know you're listening. You can tell me what you're loving so I know what to make more of. And you help others by boosting this podcast so other people like you can find the podcast too. I mean, it's a win-win-win, right? So if you want a way to pay it forward, just go to Apple Podcasts or click the link in my show notes and leave a rating and review. And if you want some more free stuff, just head over to my free Facebook group, betterbellytherapies.com/Facebook, and you can get access to all of my free support for you, including some Facebook group exclusive stuff like my podcast episode vault, where you can search the Better Belly podcast by topic and find exactly what you need to expedite your healing. I cannot wait to see you in there. Catch you guys next week.